Thank you and hello everyone. It's amazing to be here for the second year. So I set out on the road last year as a developer evangelist, developer advocate, title changed along the way. And yeah, this was the first international conference I came to as part of that, and amazing to come back and to see you all again. Well, new faces and old faces, but I've been back in New Zealand a few times, one of which in May was to launch Braintree here, which was really exciting. It was something that I know developers here were asking for quite some time, and finally crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, all the legal side of things, and was able to switch it on in May, which was amazing. But yeah, so I'm Stephen Cooper, developer Steve, like everywhere on Twitters, Facebook, Weibo, you name it. I've got that name everywhere. I do have the flu, which one of the downsides of what I do a lot of traveling. To give you some idea about how far I've traveled in 12 months, I've done 250,000 kilometers in 12 months. So it's about 7 times around the planet and about 72% of the way to the moon, apparently. Got a bit of a ways to go to the planet beyond that. But yeah, this is what I do full time. I get to come out to developer communities. I get to be part of the community. I get to geek out on stage with some amazing developers, and it's really, really cool to be able to interact and just hang out with people. Find out new technologies and even take that to other communities. So take things that are doing in one part of the world and sort of share that with other parts, like other communities all over the place. And it's really, really cool to be able to do that. I am, of course, from PayPal. Really cool company. We've been doing payment APIs for quite a while. We do a lot of payment volume per quarter, so that is how much volume we did in Q2 globally. And we have some amazing APIs. So one of my absolute favorites, and I was there in 2009 when it got launched, adaptive payments. So it lets you be basically the conduit between buyer and seller. So in one transaction, one transaction swoop, you can take money from a buyer, take your cut and pass the rest on to a seller. In effect, you can become your own marketplace, which is really cool. And as I said, we launched Braintree here in May. It was amazing to be able to bring that here. So Braintree is the only payment solution in New Zealand that can do native mobile payments. I know this is PHP, but still. So yeah, you can do native mobile payments, and we'll have a look at how that works a little bit later on. I got a really funky demo using some wizards, because wizards are cool to explain how Braintree works. But yeah, used inside things like Airbnb, Uber, GitHub. Interestingly, when I was here 12 months ago, Braintree wasn't here yet, Uber had just launched. It had launched 2 days after we'd arrived. So a bunch of people were like, wow, Uber's here. And there was like 2 cars only. Like, it was really new. It was early beta. And I was like, but Braintree's not here yet. How is that possible? So what they were doing is operating out of another country here, just because we hadn't set up shop yet, that they were able to work cross-border like that. So yeah, really, really cool. 12 lines of code, Apple Pay, Android Pay, Bitcoin, PayPal, credit card, all in one little integration, but we'll get to that bit. But here today just talked about Internet of Things, which is something that's always really had sort of a soft spot in my geekness. It's a really fast-moving world. I think it tends to move a little bit quicker than software does at times, just because there's so much innovation, so much innovation in the production, manufacture, and even the little chips that sit inside the boards. It moves really quickly. Out of the Chinese markets alone, there's the stuff that is coming out. Within 3 months, it can go from the size of a postage stamp down to the size of a quarter of the size of a postage stamp, and drop in price by 50% every 3 months. It's a really fast-moving industry. But everything basically began here. So 1969, when researchers connected 2 computers host to host for the first time. Funnily enough, when that first happened, the internet broke. So the third letter that ever went across that very early internet, it broke it. So researchers typed L, do you see L between the 2 computers? One typed L, they're on the phone, because you'd use phone back then with the internet. Do you see O, typed O, do you type G, crashed. So our very first stumblings into the internet, into the early days, basically killed the internet. And it spawned such an amazing world, though. Like out of that early network, our digital universe that we know today, it came out of that. And it is our digital universe. We reshape it as we see fit. So anytime we need to repurpose it, the social media explosion of the last few years basically came out of our need to be able to connect to each other in our universe in a whole new way. Online gaming, even the e-commerce world, which, amazing explosion. It's allowed everyone from a corner store right up to big department stores to be able to transact all over the world seamlessly every second. That is us repurposing our digital universe to be able to do a whole new way of interaction. And IoT is just the next expansion of that. IoT sort of takes that and moves it into the real world. That's our attempt to take our digital universe and readapt it again in a whole new way into smaller devices to be able to interact with things around us all the time in whole new ways. Fridges, washing machines, dryers, even toasters. So there's a really interesting project that came out a few years ago called Brad the Toaster. So Brad the Toaster, IoT device that would interact with other Brad the Toasters in the area to find out how often they were having toast. And the more that they were having toast and your Brad the Toaster was not, it would start to get upset. So it would start to wiggle its handle and vibrate across the desk and make all sorts of, the table, and make all sorts of noise. If you ignored it long enough and didn't have toast, it would contact the postal service and get itself delivered to a new owner. These things will be interacting with our environment in whole new ways and knowing more about us than we probably know about ourselves. It's just something we run around the region, a hackathon, well, not only the region but the world, a hackathon series called Battle Hack. We've even seen a lot of IoT projects. So last year we had probably about 30-40% of the winning teams, or even the hacks at Battle Hack globally, were IoT based. This year we've seen it go to about 70 to 80%. So last year, Battle Hack Sydney, we had Gearbox, which is basically a small-scale vending machine that would be in parks, some sports equipment inside. You would use a PayPal app, PayPal-powered app, to rent sports equipment from the box. So you do transaction, box opens up, and you take sports equipment out. You play with it in the park, you hit the button, put it back into the box, and transaction would happen. It would allow you to rent sports equipment. So they basically built that in 24 hours. Funny story with that, so we were, it's a 24-hour hackathon, of course, and they were using a Raspberry Pi. A tweet goes out about 11 p.m. the first night saying, "We've just burned out a Raspberry Pi, does anyone have a new one?" And this is Saturday night in Sydney, and I'm thinking, no way. So it turns out they were able to contact someone on eBay, and they basically bought a new Raspberry Pi at 11:30 from someone's driveway. Not at all suspicious. And then an hour later, another tweet goes out, "We've just burnt out that Raspberry Pi, does anyone have another one?" I'm like, no. They ended up using an Arduino Yun and basically got it all working. There was that moment when they were presenting where you're just waiting for that little door to open up, and there was like the longest second ever before it actually opened, but they went on to win. Then this year we also had, hopefully that sound doesn't play, we also had another IoT hack in Melbourne. So they produced a cyclist hoodie. Now, there's 3 lots of IoT hardware inside this hoodie, a whole bunch of LED and wiring. But essentially, as you slow down while you're cycling, a brake light will come on in the back of the hoodie. You put your arm out, the blinkers will come on or indicators will come on down the arms, and there's navigational lights in the wrist, so you can program in where you want to go using an app, and it will tell you when you're getting to a corner that you've got to turn by just flashing on the wrist. All using Braintree inside an app. And interestingly with this, and it's one of the first times I've seen it done, is you would buy the hoodie using Braintree, and then you can unlock additional functionality using your account. So they were vaulting, and you would basically set up an account, and you could just unlock the functionality you needed for whatever you wanted to use it for as you needed it. And so at PayPal, we've actually been looking at ways that we can adapt consumer trends, consumer spending inside IoT devices. Now, as of Friday, and I'm probably not supposed to show you this one. As of Friday, these are now, for the first time, these are being used in Australia. I'm working to get them here, don't worry. Christian keeps saying, can we buy them? Can we buy them? I'm like, yeah, not yet. They're coming soon. But yeah, we're using these to basically do real world transactions with a mobile app. This is the PayPal here. This is the new PayPal here. They're not even in North America yet. So yeah, the region beat them to something. But yeah, this is the contactless PayPal here. And we're using it with things like this. So this is an NFC wristband. And what we did recently in Australia in a music festival is we tied users' PayPal accounts to the NFC UDID. And then anytime they needed to purchase something, there would be a token that they could transact with just by tapping the device, and that was it. That's all they needed for the 3-day music festival. They didn't need to carry their wallets with them or make sure they had money on them. It was all just done through that. So we've also got some other projects we've been looking at integrating. We've been integrating Braintree, some of the Braintree AP or the SDK with. We've got 2 projects. So Tim Messerschmidt, my colleague in Europe, based out of Germany, was using a Spark core. He basically wired this into, this is the one he integrated into a point of sale service, but then also integrated it into a coffee machine, which was interesting. And yeah, I remember talking to him before he did it, saying, you're wiring that straight into the mains, so you might want to be careful with that one. And I have burned a t-shirt out before. We'll keep that story to the end. But yeah, this is using a Spark core. This is using Node. This one's not using PHP. The next one I've got, the one I did for last year's conference, that's actually using PHP on a board. So there's some PHP in there, don't worry. So this is using Node inside a Spark core. And the GitHub for this is all available. Both of these projects are available on GitHub. So if anyone wants the code, come see me. All the links on there too. And I'll put these slides up when we're done. Essentially, it works in 2 ways. So we've got the front end, the back end, which the back end then talks to Braintree, and then the Spark Cloud and the Spark Core. So for those that don't know what the Spark Core is, essentially it talks, the single board itself talks to a service layer, which you can then interact with from back-end code, so from a back-end server, or you can contact directly through a front end. In this case, because we're talking to Braintree as well, he's going from the front-end interface to the back-end, which talks to Braintree, the Spark Cloud core, which then talks to the Spark core. So the demo site, really basic. We like to keep our demos sort of really basic so devs can sort of get the idea of how it works and then build from it if they need to. Really basic interface, Braintree v0, do a transaction, which triggers, looks like that, which then triggers transaction to happen on the back end and goes through that flow that we just talked about. Transaction itself, because it's using Braintree, really simple. It's like only a few lines of code, do amazing things. That's the Spark core. And then this part here actually triggers the transaction to go straight through to the Spark Cloud. Again, really, really simple, really, really minimal. So something I took around a bit last year was a little e-commerce printer. I wanted to build something that would be used sort of in the real world and be able to interact in a new way. Basically something that a coffee shop would be able to implement really easily, really cheaply. So I got a thermal printer. You can buy them for like $40. They're really, really cheap. This one from ADA Fruit. And an Arduino Yun. Now, I looked at a number of boards at the time. The Yun kind of is a combination of a few different things. It's basically like a really scaled down web server all on one little board, basically, with Wi-Fi. And I was like, yay, it's got Wi-Fi. There's a few dragons, though, that they don't tell you about that you kind of realize once you start developing with it. We'll get into that a little bit. But essentially, I put together this nice little cardboard box with an LCD panel on the front, and there's all the wiring in the back. Essentially, it was a self-contained printer unit that would, with its own battery, with its own power supply, you could literally put it anywhere, and as soon as a new order came in on the website, it connected straight to Braintree and just printed out a receipt. Put it in this nice little cardboard box, and then kind of looked at it and went, I need to take this through international customs. This could be tricky. Thankfully, went through 7 countries, never got stopped. It got retired a few months ago because the box kind of was getting all tatty, and the LCD panel, I'd lost a little dimmer pot, so I'd wired it directly straight into the actual board and may have set the values too high and burnt out the LCD. It was getting old. It had been a fair way around the world. But I do have a video of it working, so yay. Essentially, it's a very similar thing. I'm just using Braintree for the front end. It says Ruby, but we're going to do PHP. Whoops, should have taken that one out. It can work either Ruby or PHP. PHP works better, yay. And of course, it interacts with Braintree. And then on the Yun side, so the Yun actually talks directly to the Braintree server, and I could only do that using PHP on a Yun, which was interesting to get working. But yeah, managed to get it running. Front of the website looks like this. This can be anything you want it to be. Essentially, I wanted to do some sort of responsive website that you could buy like literally anything through. Of course, responsive because it works on mobile, yay. And then V0 box. So you go through, do checkout, do transaction, and then receipt prints out. Back-end code, very much the same. I'm using Braintree on the front end. Got my creds in there, generating a client token, drop that into some JavaScript, that gets you that nice little V0 box. And then on the back end, so I'm using Ajax to trigger, to do the front end transaction, which just sends through to a back end processing script, PHP of course, and then create the transaction. What I'm doing different here though is, one of the differences between some of the PayPal or most of the PayPal APIs and the Braintree API or SDKs is you don't store cart data on Braintree. So unlike all the PayPal ones, you can store your transactional information, you can store your postage and whatever else you need to store in the transaction. You can't do that on Braintree. So what I did, Braintree has this thing called custom fields. So you can actually create your own customized field names and then store whatever you want in there. There was some guys at BattleHack London last year that were using this as document storage. Like they were storing entire documents in these fields. So what I did was using the cart data on the front end is I just do a jQuery stringify to basically contain that into a JSON string and then store that in the custom field. When I query the transactions on the Yun, I can pull that back out and then use that to print the receipt. So essentially, I don't need a database. I can just use Braintree to store the data in using that method. That is the Yun. So there's 2 sides to the Yun, and this was one of the things I kind of liked when I was looking to see which boards to use. There's a lot of Arduino boards where you can actually just get the board itself and then plug, using the pins on top, you plug in a Wi-Fi board, that gets you internet. The good thing about the Yun is the Wi-Fi is already built in, and I thought, yay, that's a win. There's 2 sides to the Yun though. There's the Arduino side, which does all your pin interfacing, basically like your C++, your Arduino side, and then there's the scaled down Linux server side. So that's essentially where you do all your heavy lifting. That's where you do all your analytics. You do your server calls to get more information out, handle the data, push that back out through to the Arduino side. To interface the 2, there's a bridge. So the bridge is like a JSON database, basically. You can put things in from either side and then access them. There is so much latency in that bridge, it drove me nuts for about 40 hours after I got it. What I ended up doing, and I normally have a slide that shows this, but because of the latency, when I'd put in, I'd use the Linux side to pull in the receipt data, push that into the bridge, and then the Arduino side would realize that there's a variable there, pull that out, print receipt. The problem was when that data started going in, it wouldn't finish by the time the Arduino side realized there was something there and there was nothing to print until the second time round when it had finished transferring, it'd trigger for the next receipt to print and print from the first time. And I was like, no, chicken before the egg. What I ended up doing was I'm using SQLite on the Linux side. So I push a notification into the JSON bridge and then get it to read the information basically from an SQLite database. So in a sense, I had to replace the bridge to deal with the latency. If they fixed that, it would actually be a really good board. There's no version 2 that I know of, so sadly. Other than that, it's a great little board. You get Linux, like a scaled down WRT Linux, and you get the Arduino side. So it's functionally, it's an amazing little piece of hardware. And so on the Yun side, on the Linux side, because it is scaled down, you can't run it like you would like a full server. Like it just won't handle it. It's not built for that. Power consumption alone, you want to keep that down, and also the processor can't really handle it. It has Python built in, and I tried to do this through Python. It completely just struggled. What I needed to install wouldn't configure, and so I ended up using PHP as a daemon process on the Linux side to basically query the Braintree SDK to pull out transactions and then pass that through to the SQLite database and print a receipt. So I used PHP, yay. So demo of it working. Hopefully that auto plays. Yes, it is. So that's the front-end website loading. Trigger transaction. Yay, and transaction happens. So once that transaction's then loaded onto Braintree, the Yun side of the printer, yeah, see, high quality cardboard box. Well, so the Yun basically detects that there's a new transaction to print, one that it hadn't handled previously, and just prints a receipt out. So that's basically using Braintree as the database. So I didn't have to have other than the SQLite database, didn't have to have a database running server side. I could literally just run it all through that. Really simple. All up, it costs about 120 Australian to put together, including the high quality 99-cent cardboard box. The Yuns, I think, go for about $80 odd, 75, $80. So relatively cheap to put together, a little bit fiddly with a lot of the pin wiring and whatnot. That was just mainly the LCD. But quite sturdy, did the job quite often. I would also have, at conferences when I'd have the little demo box set up, I'd have people in the audience sort of sending through fake transactions just to see their receipts print out while I was presenting, which was always kind of amusing. But interestingly, IoT isn't just about hardware. And so I saw an article probably about 10 months ago, which was rather interesting because it had an interesting idea and an interesting concept in it by saying that it was by Tim O'Reilly. And he basically said that IoT isn't just about hardware, it's about disrupting systems in whole new ways, like encouraging new ways of thinking, and even new ways that we could do things that we like in whole new ways, which is what IoT kind of is, because being able to produce these little boards, being able to do whole new things, like receipt printers aren't new, they've been around for quite a while. The difference is that now I can do it in a different way. And so Tim actually started talking about Uber doing that as well. Like, they don't really do hardware. And I kind of thought, well, do they? When they have the car there, their app basically powers a car in a whole different way. Like, we would previously have to have taxis, which, didn't really have apps, well, per se. But yeah, apps like Uber being able to power whole new industries and being able to sort of have whole new systems in whole new ways, which was an interesting thought because I hadn't thought of it quite like that before. And if you look at how we would previously do sort of the e-commerce flow, you would have an application, you'd add products, you do a cart review, you create an account if you didn't already have one, or you log into an account, you do the payment, and then you get the thank you screen. Then returning customers, you'd then do the sign in, you'd add products, you do the cart review, you do payment, then you do the thank you. So what we can do with things like Uber is you sign in, you add products, cart review, then thank you. Like, there's steps that you can take out and remove because you don't have to worry about things like payment anymore, because you're doing what's known as a tokenized payment. So you're storing someone's financial information and then just reusing that via a secure token later on whenever you need to do the transaction. So you can remove like a whole step there. For a user, literally all it means is just hitting a button and then the transaction's done. Like, they don't even have to worry about it. Which is essentially what Uber do. You create an account, you attach payment method, and that's it. You get in, you use the service, and like, it's done. Like, beyond setting up, creating a profile and attaching payment method, that's all stored inside Braintree. Like, beyond that, There's a token that you get back, you store against the user, and then you can just use that to redo the transaction again and again, which is I used it last night coming back from the pre-conference thing. Is got the car, got in, like that was it. That's all I had to do, and then I could just get out and go to the hotel, which is good because I'm still recovering from flu. How that actually works, I've got some fun. Here comes the wizards. It's a little bit magical, haha. How that actually works, so sandbox.braintreegateway.com, grab your merchant creds, yay. So this is what you do on 14-hour flights. Call in your SDK, drop that into some code, drop in your creds. Now here's where it gets a little bit different from the straight Braintree transaction, is using that, I'm then going to create a customer on Braintree Gateway. From that, you get a customer ID back that you then use to attach a payment method. So that is basically how the normal transactioning method works, is you use that to generate a client token. You drop in some JavaScript, we'll get to that little tiny box. From that, user types in their financial information, you get a payment nonce back. So instead of doing a transaction though, what we're going to do is store their card details inside the vault against their customer ID. So I post over the payment method nonce, I drop in the customer ID from before, and then I get a token back. Now that token is their tokenized card. So you basically store, and it looks like that. Doesn't really do that though, doesn't move around the screen. You get a token back. So the token is what we use to do the transaction. From that point on, I can use that token to transact against them whenever we need to. So whenever they use a service, whenever they buy a product, from that point on, that's where the magic is. Calling the SDK, drop in my creds. Transaction, I'm going to do a transaction for $100. And then I drop in the customer ID and their token, like that's it. That's the transaction done. And from that point on, that's all I have to do. And then everyone wins, yay. So I thought I'd do a quick demo of that one, in PHP of course. So I got a 3-step page set up, and essentially just walking through that in PHP. So I've got creating a customer, is that big enough? Let me make that bigger. That's better. Creating a customer ID here, which gets me the customer ID, then generating a client token. So this is all going to happen in the index step. I drop that into some JavaScript to get my little payment box. That will then post over to the second step, which is where I'm going to attach the payment method. And from that point, all I have to do, I've already got the customer ID, so I'm going to drop that in there. And once they fill in their financial information, I'll then have the payment method nonce, and this will basically generate the token. And then the third step is just doing the transaction using the token. So let's hope the demo gods are happy. Ta-da! All right, so I've already got my customer ID, which just got created on the index. Let's type in my financial info. No one copy down that card. Store that in the vault. Fingers crossed. Looks like the demo gods are happy. So then I get a token back. Wait, can everyone see that? Let me make that bigger. Whoops, too big. So then I get a token back. Now this token I can store against the user profile created on my system, and then that's what I use to just constantly do the transactioning. So I can do a payment now for $123.45, transact against the token, and yep, that's it. That's all I have to do. So from that point on, I can continually use that same token to just continually do transactions as the user requests service, requests product. That's it, easy. Again, these demos are all on GitHub, so they're on my GitHub, github.com/developersteve. Yeah, more than happy for everyone to go get it, play with them, tell me that I've done all the things wrong. No. So just wrapping up all that, I guess the big thing that always excites me about IoT is it does allow us to interact in whole new ways with users, and particularly branching out from our digital universe as we sort of branch into the real world. Mixing payments in with that kind of adds a whole other layer where you're able to transact and help the user basically through their day in whole new ways. I love this quote. It's from it's a little bit of a data book now, but the 3 most dangerous things in the world are a programmer with a soldering iron, a hardware engineer with a software patch, and a user with an idea. And I guess the good thing with IoT now, though, is you don't even need the soldering iron. It's all plug and play. Like you literally, and it's very forgiving tech. I burnt my LCD screen out on my little printer like 3 or 4 times over before it died. It's usually very forgiving tech. So very low cost, very, very cheap. And possibilities are endless. We're seeing IoT things now appearing like everything from Brad the Toaster to, there's one of my other favorite little IoT sort of gadgets in the last year, and I'm literally waiting for them to launch, literally, is the Nixie. So the Nixie was a IBM hackathon entry from about a year and a half ago. Didn't even need to win, it went on to win. It's a wearable drone. So you wear it just like a watch, you flick it off and it launches. It then tracks you around the room, so it's the ultimate selfie stick. Like you don't even need to hold it down on a stick. You can control it from your phone and fly it around, but it's literally like a flying camera, a wearable camera. Started out as a pair of glasses. As for how in 24 hours, how they went from glasses to a wearable drone, anyone knows. Imagination. Kind of dawned on me recently though, everyone remember when smartphones got really good cameras on them and you'd sort of see a sea of smartphones at conferences and concerts and stuff. There's going to be a sea of these little drone Nixies like at conferences now, like once they launch, there's going to be like swarms of them all over. There are going to be no fly zones around stages. But possibilities are endless. So to give you an idea, and I realize that no one's going to be able to see that, but come up after and you can have a look. That's an ESP8266. Of course, you all knew that. This is the Dash 1. So this came out in January. They're worth about $4. That's got Wi-Fi in it. So you think the Arduino Yuan basically was about that big. About a year ago, that's what I was buying. I can get that now for $4 from China. You buy them by the bagful. So that was in January. I got this one in March. I couldn't find a picture of this one. That's the Dash 3. So that still has Wi-Fi in it, and it has more memory and uses less power. These are now worth $2. So in 3 months, we went from that to that. And like by the end of the year, I'm probably going to have connected dust. I did get another one recently which has Bluetooth in it. Very same type of thing. Like it's literally, the IoT hardware is moving so fast that I think the industry itself is also having some issues keeping up. These boards were running BASIC originally. Someone worked out how to hack Arduino to fit inside these boards. So again, like these things just move so quickly that, yeah, it's amazing to see where it's going. And that is me. Thank you.